And the regulatory aspect of it is tricky. Now, a good thing is that there are some pretty well-trod methods of making sure that you have, if you're doing software as a medical device like we are, ensuring that you have the right trials, the right data. Regulators are very, very interested in your data set. Is it biased? Do you have enough ethnicities represented? Have you done post-market surveillance, which we have, like all those kinds of things. But you can get into a bunch of countries with a few different clearances because they work together on certain things. Now, where really the regulatory regimes are tricky is how do you actually sell it, right? Every country has some pretty basic things like, anti-bribery and anti-kickback and all the things you would imagine. But some countries are very, very aggressive about that because they've had bad experiences, but they actually might prevent models that really benefit the patient.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Business of Learning podcast. My name is Joao Camargo, and my guest here today is Bryn Weaver, who's the president at TeleMedC. Bryn, thank you so much for being here today. I'm really excited to have you on.
My pleasure.
Why don't we start off with you just telling everyone a little bit more about TeleMedC? I am excited to have this chat, especially because of what you guys have going on. I've had so many conversations with different companies that are implementing AI into healthcare and doing different things, but what you guys are doing is especially different. So why don't you tell everyone that's listening right now what you guys are all about, who you help, and any context you'd like to share about the company?
Absolutely. So TeleMedC's mission is to end preventable blindness by extending kind of specialist influence in screening beyond traditional specialist environments. And we do that using kind of three things. The first thing is a connected platform. We need to make sure that we can reach all the individuals where they are, where it's convenient. We've seen that kind of convenience roll out throughout our lives, right? I don't know if you remember back to Redbox, right? Like that was kind of revolutionary because it brought the movies closer to where people were. And we're trying to do that with eye screening. The second kind of leg of the stool, if you will, is AI. AI is really good at pattern recognition. And we've got basically a class 2 medical device in Europe, Australia, Singapore, and a few other jurisdictions that can actually diagnose disease on the basis of retinal scans. And then the third leg on the stool is connected, easy to use, low cost hardware that can be deployed in all these places where the patients are. So if there's a metaphor, I always like to try out my metaphors and you can tell me if it's terrible, but the metaphor that we like to use is imagine that you've got this path. At the bottom of the path is the patient, the person, and their primary care person. That might be their general practice doctor. It might be an optician in their optical shop, but it's somebody near to where they are that they trust. Then at the top of this mountain, up a winding path, is the specialist in optical care, has all the expertise, but it's sometimes hard to get there. I mean, it's just human nature. I'll give an example from my own health, right? Not eye care related. I went to my GP 2 years ago. And after scolding me for my weight being not where she wanted it to be, she then reminded me that I needed to get a skin screening done, right? And I said, sure, I'll do it because I'd just been scolded for other things. So I was not about to tell her no. And then anyway, I got done with the appointment, walked out, checked my email, got in my car, did all these things and completely forgot about it, right? Every now and again, I would remember and then I would forget again because life is busy. There was nothing really wrong with my skin. She didn't say, oh, you really got to get this checked out. So I put it off. Another year rolls around. I go back in and she says, hey, Bryn, you didn't get your skin screening done. Why not? I said, oh, it's so difficult. She said, the screening place is right around the corner on the same floor. She literally had the nurse walk me over there the next time. We see a lot of that in eye care. Most eye diseases can be diagnosed and caught early, especially with the help of AI. But it's just the human nature of it that eye diseases often don't show signs of anything until they're pretty far advanced. So early screening is critical to catching things like diabetic retinopathy, glaucoma, macular degeneration, and other eye diseases. And so the founder of our company, Paris Seagram, he's a serial entrepreneur. About a little over 10 years ago, he saw this big gap, and he's a hardware and a software guy. I've worked with him for about 15 years on different projects. And he thought, wow, we can really make a difference here. We can move the diagnosis closer, make it faster, make it more accurate, make sure that the pieces of the healthcare puzzle are talking to each other, and then it's easy for the patient. So that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, no, that's really, really awesome. Thank you for sharing those stories as well, because I think everyone is guilty of doing that. I'm like, yeah, I'll get it done. I'll get it done. And then like it just puts it off. And sometimes it can be minor things, but oftentimes they are minor things that can lead to big things that are very important to look over, especially when we're talking about eyesight. It's
For sure.
dare I say, the most important of our senses. And not I don't personally know any blind people now that I think about it, but I would assume that if they had to choose, can I have vision or choose one of the senses? Vision is one of the most important ones because it's everything that we measure. It's everything that we see, but it's also how we live our day to day, and it becomes so easy to forget, and we can take it for granted. So as we start seeing these small signs, it's already too late. So I'd love for you to tell me a little bit more about how AI is able to recognize these patterns that oftentimes is not possible in the usual methodology, because catching it early, as you said, is the real difference maker here. So tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's not so much AI is super different in different types of diagnoses, right? For retinal scans, we're taking basically what's called a fundus image. Now, we have technology in the works that will do a 3D image called OCT, but that's not been released yet for us.
Mhm.
We take this 2D color fundus image. It's literally at the back of the eye. It's millimeters to get the shot on, right? Like you're not getting this with your iPhone camera.
Mm.
But you take the fundus image, and AI is really good once you have the expertise in how to train AI. And by the way, it's not it's a pretty unique group of people that actually know how to do this, right? You can't just take somebody that's familiar with AI, not even image recognition AI, right? That's an even smaller group. But then when you talk about kind of eye images, it's a very specialized group that actually know how to do that. Now, there are a bunch of companies, we're glad, that are out there trying to solve these problems, and some of them doing it very well. To answer your question though, it's not that the specialists can't do this, right? They
Mm.
often that the traditional way of doing it was manually, right?
Mhm.
Somebody shows up to an optometrist in the US, they have a big fancy machine, they upsell you on the out-of-pocket cost, and you pay for it, and they go literally look at it, and they're circling things on the picture, and it takes them a few minutes, right? We found it varies across specialists, and it really varies with volume, and we can talk about that a little bit in some people's approach to telehealth. That's really
Mhm.
interesting. But what we found is that, if you took kind of an average of what somebody, what you don't want is a false negative, right? There was
Yeah.
something wrong and you didn't see it. So you would say that an experienced practitioner, specialist of some kind, would actually probably catch it 80 to 85% of the time. And the more severe the disease got, they would catch it more often because it becomes more apparent on the end.
Yeah.
Our AI, it has like a 97, 98% accuracy on that.
Wow.
So there's some improvement, but it's not that we're displacing folks. It's really the issue that the care is inconvenient, right?
Mhm.
People don't go to their optometrist as often as they should.
Yeah.
And in some countries, for example, optometrists don't even exist in the same form that they are in the US. So, for example, in Germany, there are some optometrists, but they're not as numerous as you might see in the US. And people at the optical shops are not qualified or licensed to do these kinds of things. So everybody has to go to an ophthalmologist. But there are a few of those, right? And so it's really a numbers game and a geography game. Where is the person that needs to have this care rendered, and can they actually even get there for that manual screen?
Mhm.
So we do think that we can improve the accuracy both on the false positive and the false negative side of
Mhm.
things. But people can do this, an ophthalmologist, a trained ophthalmologist can actually look inside your eye live or through an image and do these same things very well.
Mhm.
It's not as easy to get to that.
Yeah, the efficiency side of things, the accuracy, I guess I'll call it the completion rate. That's probably the worst term to use it here, but the accurate completion rates, if
Yeah.
that can be increased, why wouldn't you want to do that, right? And it's one of those things as well. And tell me, sorry, it's one of those things where it sounds to me that it can also be leveraged in a way where it's much less invasive to the actual patient itself, but it also can create less friction to the actual procedure itself. Because as you said, actually, when I was a little bit younger, maybe I was like 12 or 13, maybe even younger than that, I had to go to an ophthalmologist just to get my stuff checked. And there's many eye drops and like things that are just completely not pleasant. I'll use
Yeah.
that term, is not
Yeah.
pleasant, especially for someone who's much younger. Adults, like, they know it's part of the process, but for kids that have to go through that, like, it is a huge hassle. So it sounds to me like what you guys are doing is able to decrease a lot of that friction. The procedures are much easier, but it correct me if I'm wrong on this part, can also make it easier to do a telehealth virtual approach beyond that. So it's not like you have to go in every single time to do it. Is like you do that procedure, that gets done, and then after from there, that support can actually be virtual. Is that the case as well, or am I completely off here?
For the most part, we have a proprietary hardware camera, fundus camera that we use
Yes.
to automate and automatically connects to our system, and it's pretty portable. So our chief medical officer, Dr. Jack Tan, he's based out of Brisbane in Australia. Jack likes to go into the outback, and we've actually done some indigenous healthcare screening study isn't the right word, but programs with some
Mhm.
nonprofit partners to make sure we can get fundus images of people, that are natives in the outback to a doctor that's not even in the location, and had
Mm,
really good success because, the old method was, oh my gosh, let's fly everybody in, or let's try to fly the doctor out. And it just does, it's too hard. But if you can get a machine
yeah.
and put it in one of the local health posts for a period of time,
Mhm.
you can get people through. And we do. One of the neat things about our technology that I really like is we have a lightweight kind of patient management system where the professionals can not only look at what happened last year, but the AI can actually compare the 2 years, and we have
Mm,
AI trained to detect lesion. They call it lesions. A lot of the eye diseases manifest through bleeding, bleeding at the back of the eye. So diabetic retinopathy, that's what that is. It's bleeding at the back of the eye that tends
mm,
to manifest in folks with diabetes. And so we can actually track the lesion progression. And so maybe they were a green. We have a red kind of stoplight, red, yellow, green. Red means get to the ophthalmologist right away. Yellow means you probably ought to go anyway. And green means you're okay for now, right?
mhm.
If they were a green last year and there may be a yellow this year, we can actually tell how quickly it's progressing
Wow, that's interesting.
thing, and it can help. People. There's some anecdotes in when we were testing this out in Australia. Our company's based out of Brisbane. We had a kind of a health fair type thing for people to come up and test it, and there was a relatively young lady, and we saved her eyesight. Right, she had no idea that she had a disease happening. We caught it quickly. She was able to go in and get treated, and it saved her eyesight. So
Wow.
this kind of idea of getting it closer to where the people are, and to your point, our machine, we don't have to dilate, right? It's non-mydriatic is what they call it.
Mhm.
And that is, it's not a huge barrier for most people, but for some people it is, right? It just adds to that, oh, I'm gonna wait to do it another day, right?
Yeah, I'll tell you this for certain, just from my experience, from my memories of that process. If I knew I had to go through the same process, I wouldn't do it. I would not do it. Like even if the doctor is like, "Hey, this is something you really need to do," I probably would push it off. So knowing that there are other ways that simplify that process that aren't as invasive, music to my ears. But I haven't had any eyesight problems since then, so that's always good. It was definitely a false alarm, but it's good to hear. And I wanted to ask you too, being a global company, I think the term you used when we first had our conversation is like a small but mighty global company, or a smaller company that the smaller global company that you might hear of. But being a global company and trying to, actually not even trying, being in these different markets, different countries that operate differently, have different procedures, have different, I'm assuming, what's the word I'm looking here,
Like maybe kind of the healthcare ecosystem is that.
yeah, the healthcare ecosystem. I was looking for the back end where a lot of red tape, the word is missing my brain right
Oh,
now.
regulations,
Regulations,
regulatory.
that's
Yeah,
the
there
word.
you go. Yeah.
Regulations, yeah, the different regulations as well. Talk to me about some of the challenges that can come with that too, because even though there is a lot of opportunity with that, there are probably a lot of hurdles in the way. And also, I wanted to clarify, some of the countries that you mentioned were Singapore, Germany, Australia. You didn't mention North America or other countries in Europe. Talk to me a little bit more about that too.
Yeah, I mean, so definitely you're right on there in terms of how difficult it is to operate globally. Really, as a small company, as a startup, you have to really try as many things as you can. So we kind of got our start in Singapore. The Ministry of Health there is very forward thinking, and they've had a mission to kind of eradicate the severe negative aspects of diabetes within their population. And so we were able to fit within a program sponsored by the Ministry of Health that fit really well with our technology. It
Mhm.
also allowed us to kind of improve the technology, make sure it was clinical ready. But Singapore has a different setup than Australia. A lot of the medical clinics, so for example, we're deployed in over 250 GP clinics in Singapore. They're tiny, right? These are tiny. Singapore is a very small country. The GP clinics by American standards are quite small. And so they actually don't want to have a camera. Even our cameras, this big. It's not that big, but they don't want to have it there all the time. So they actually, the primary care networks is what they call them, actually rotate the cameras. See,
Mm,
that's an aspect that's not even regulatory, right? It's just like kind of practical. How is the healthcare ecosystem architected, right?
mhm.
And so that you're absolutely right, and the regulatory aspect of it is tricky. Now a good thing is that there are some pretty well trod methods of making sure that you have, if you're doing software as a medical device like we are, of ensuring that you have the right trials, the right data.
Yeah.
Regulators are very, very interested in your data set. Is it biased? Do you have enough ethnicities represented? Have you done post-market surveillance, which we have, like all those kinds of things? But you can get into a bunch of countries with a few different clearances because they work together on certain
Mhm.
things. Now, where really the regulatory regimes are tricky is how do you actually sell it, right? Every country has some pretty basic things like, anti-bribery and
Sure.
anti-kickback and all the things you would imagine.
Mm,
But some countries are very, very aggressive about that because they've had bad experiences, but they actually might prevent models that really benefit the patient. So,
mm.
for example, one of the things we've been working on deploying in Germany through optical shops. Now, optical shops are not licensed. They're not healthcare providers. They're not
Yeah.
licensed to do this. But we have an ophthalmologist remotely reading, double checking the AI on the back end just for patient comfort, right? Like our AI is actually licensed to do the diagnosis, but people feel more comfortable if there's another
Sure.
person involved. So we do that, but we've been trying to look at models where we can increase the touch points between the opticians in their optical shops and the ophthalmologists in their specialty clinics. And there are the German regulators are very strict on certain things. And so there are some unique models that really aren't kickbacks of any kind. It's really just kind of like cost sharing or things like that
Mm.
that have been probably used in bad ways in the past. So that can be tricky. Now you asked a question about North America. Obviously, I'm sitting here in near Boulder, Colorado, right?
Yeah.
And I am the only U.S. employee right now.
Uh-huh.
And Paris Seagram, the founder, and I just go way back. I've been excited to help him for about the last year on this
Mhm.
project. And we actually, a lot of our early technology came out of US research institutions that we
Mm.
licensed. But because the company was based in Australia, where Para is located, and because of this early opportunity in Singapore, we kind of grew up in that regime and doing those regulatory clearances, which were not FDA. But
Mm.
FDA, US and FDA, we know how to get here. It's a pretty well trod mechanism due to some competitor companies that are here that we can get clearance on for diabetic retinopathy screening pretty quickly.
Mm.
But we've been a bootstrap company and we're really small. That's why I say, we're the smallest global company maybe that you'll meet.
Yeah.
And so we're going to be doing some fundraising, and we're hoping to use that to one of the uses of proceeds would be to get our regulatory FDA 510(k) clearance here done and launch here.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing all that. And it's so interesting because people, and this is a huge generalization for me, but I would assume that people, they often can hear a company that operates globally and is like, yeah, simple as that. Just do the same thing you do in the US, but now do it in Europe, and now do it in Australia, and now do it
Yeah.
in Asia. And it's like, oh, it's actually not as simple as you might think it is, because all of these countries operate in completely different ways. So it's interesting to hear firsthand some of those stories and some of the things you have to go through there. So thank you for sharing that. And I'd love to understand too, in your own perspective, Bryn, what do you think is the hardest part of growing your business? Let's say you had a magic wand that you could wave, solve one thing, a challenge, an obstacle, whatever it might be, that would allow you to hit your client acquisition goals, revenue goals, maybe other targets that you have. You wave that wand. I know that sometimes there's many things you like to solve, but just one thing that would allow everything to be achieved just like that. What's the one thing you'd like to solve?
I think it's efficiently finding product market fit. And that is really tricky in a med tech play because in many, B2B cases, you're looking at a single buyer of something, right? So you can go and do customer interviews and everything else and find your product market fit, right? But in medtech in particular, you've got a bunch of parties because you've got your payer. Sometimes that is private pay out of pocket. It is the patient themselves.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's not. And every healthcare ecosystem has a different set of payers. In the US, we're very heavy on private insurance, but you also have Medicare, Medicaid, right? In the Australia, it's all paid for in Medicare, right? In Germany, it's 85% of the population has public healthcare and 15% has private insurance. And so you've got the payer, you've got the patient, may or may not be the same party. And beyond that, then you've got the medical practitioners, and medical practitioners for all are busy. They're well trained, they're smart folks, and sometimes they have a hard time trying new things. so so work, getting into their workflow as well. So you've kind of got like almost three customers that you're trying to product market fit. And I think that really not just our technology, but any med tech technology. And that's something I don't know I appreciated fully before really diving in on this project. It's super fascinating, but like you say, you have to figure it out for each. We kind of take a country by country approach. Some countries are very similar to each other, but others are quite different. And so, that it's that product market fit and figuring it out quickly enough, right? I mean, as a startup, you're burning cash and you've got to get to product market fit before you burn through your cash, right? And that's always the challenge, the time and finding that.
Yeah, that's really interesting to hear, because having the different, I guess I'll call it the consumers. Actually, the consumers won't be the right. I'll say the clients, because the end user, or the one that benefits, is actually the patient. But having different clients, ICPs that you're trying to understand fully, is an interesting dynamic. Which of those steps, be it the payer, be it the physicians, the clinics themselves, which one do you think is the hardest to actually transfer the message to get the conversations, really educate them on the value that they will gain from this? It sounds to me like it would be the actual physicians, or the health professionals themselves, because they are so busy, because they probably get a million other people trying to reach them with similar solutions. But talk to me a little bit more about that as well.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that in terms of the space we play in right now, in most countries, there's some kind of reimbursement for it, whether through private insurance. But those are things that they're kind of gating items, right? You either are going to go into the country or not based on whether or not you've got a payer there. It's not that you're going to sell the payer. You can, over time, you can get the payers to change behavior, but it's a long, long cycle. And so it's really kind of binary there. But in terms of actually trying to sell somebody and change behavior, yeah, absolutely. The medical professionals, because they're the gatekeepers, right? Our whole thesis is developed around the idea that primary care has this relationship. And we are talking primary care quite broadly: pharmacists, opticians, general practice doctors, kind of anybody who has that local, frequent, trusted touch point with an individual. They have that relationship, but we've somehow got to get them comfortable that we're adding value for them and for their patient, and it's not too hard. And that can be really tricky. I mean, healthcare information systems are incredibly balkanized, and so that actually is a barrier, but also something that we believe is an advantage to what we do. We have this really well architected, connected platform. We don't need that much data out of any system. We're secure. We have had security audits, all the things they look for. But yeah, just kind of changing the healthcare provider's mind about how do they go, instead of writing it on a piece of paper, click a button in your that we've integrated into with your EMS system and get that, your electronic health record system, and get the workflow going. So yeah, it's a little bit of that, but they're all hard. I mean, it's not. I wish I could say like one of them is super easy. Like getting people to trust AI also is a trick. Making sure they understand that it's really good and why it's really good and why do they still need to do it.
Yeah, educating them on the process, all those things. Well, that sounds like quite the task as well. Thank you for sharing that, Bryn. And I have one final question for you here. And it's actually not a question from me. It's a question from my last guest to you, and they had no idea who you were. So here is their question. Are you ready for it?
I'm ready.
As a business leader, what is one question you always ask to drive continuous improvement and change in your business?
Oh, wow. That's such a great question. There's a question I ask to drive continual improvement and change. I would have to say,
I'm a big fan of asking, like, what haven't we thought about? Just
Mm.
I think groupthink can be really, really detrimental, but it's so easy as humans to do, especially if you're an organization that considers yourself, have a great culture and everybody gets along. Sometimes it's hard to get people to really surface what they really think about something. So just, I don't know if that's the perfect way of phrasing, but it's that idea, like, hey, tell me, tell me why we're wrong.
Yeah.
Tell me how we're wrong on this,
Hmm.
just to make sure that we look at it from different perspectives and invite that kind of thinking. Because I think that the superpower of any organization is getting smart people who are humble enough to look at the really tough stuff and freely exchange ideas and listen. I mean, that's the whole reason we create companies, right? Is because we can't do it ourselves. So I think anything that can get that, like, what's our blind spot? I think that's a good
Mm. That's
thing to
awesome.
have.
I like that. I like that because I mean, just tying it to the culture that you mentioned as well, when you have a team culture where not everybody's just saying yes, like, yeah, well, yeah, great idea, let's move forward. Is like, no, tell me why this idea that we are about to execute on will not work. What are we missing? What's the blind spot? As you said, how can we make sure that if we are going to execute on this, it's actually the right thing for us to do? So that's awesome. I really like that because I don't know if the right way of phrasing it would be the mob mentality, when people just get excited about one specific thing and everybody just yeah, and then it flows into something that can be very beneficial, but it also can be very detrimental if not done properly. So I really like that. What have we not thought of? What's our blind spot? How will they go? Well, how this can go wrong. Bryn, thank you so much for your time. This has been such an
Absolutely. No, thanks for inviting me, Sean. It's been
yeah.
really fun.
It's been awesome. So where should people go if they want to learn a little bit more about you and of course a little bit more about TeleMedC?
So telemedc.com. We've got all our products out there and what we're doing on our pipeline. If you're a German speaker, we've got a .de site as well. I'm not. All my German gets automatically translated by Chrome. But yeah, we're trying to keep the world aware of what we're trying to accomplish, and fingers crossed, we'll get this rocket ship off the ground and really make an impact. I mean, we really, really want to make an impact on people's lives.
Amazing. I will leave all the links down here in the description if you're listening to this and you want to check it out. And if you're hearing this conversation and you want to hear more conversations like this, please hit the subscribe button and I will see you on the next episode. Thank you so much again for your time, Brett.